if this is going to have to be a mutual admiration society for just a moment, what you guys do on What? Wait? Or is it Wait, What? I always forget. It's been amazing. 5 seasons in, I think.
Welcome to Wait What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGee, the podcast where we take a sometimes irreverent, sometimes cynical, and yes, even a sometimes serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, Tim McGee.
And I'm _𝘵𝗵𝗴.
Good top of the morning to you, Dave. Oh, crack was 90 in Ireland last week.
Well, I could barely get you to, do Irish stuff when we were on last week while you were there, but now you've just, it's absorbed into you now even more, and you're ready to drop it. Yeah. I love it.
My favorite is Jesus, Mary, and Joseph and the wee donkey. Funny story, went in part to look up my mother's ancestry, came to find out that her grandfather, my great-grandfather, was born in the U.S. I had just assumed they were, Johnny-come-lately to the United States. But we were in a small cafe in Ballyshannon, which is the hometown of who Eric Clapton calls the world's greatest guitar player. Do you happen to know who that is?
Well, I always know that his love of the blues and Robert Johnson was a big driver for him, but...
Well, Eric Clapton was once asked, how does it feel to be the world's greatest guitar player? And he said, I don't know, you'd have to ask Rory Gallagher.
Well... That's a line that gets perpetuated by everybody, because some people say he says you'll have to ask Prince, which is just so I think that's I think those lines
tale?
He might have said that about Rory Gallagher, but
anyway,
I think it's an apocryphal tale. Yes.
Anyway,
I can't wait what you on that anymore because you use it so effectively.
Thank you. Anyway, Ballyshannon is the hometown of birthplace of Rory Gallagher. It's now the home of the Rory Gallagher Festival. My mother's maiden name is Gallagher. Up until my teen years, I had one eyebrow like Liam and Noel Gallagher of Oasis. And I met 2 lovely older women in the cafe in Ballyshannon, Mary and Valentine Gallagher. And they were lovely. And they told me that there were so many Gallaghers in Ballyshannon and Donegal area that you had to basically go by a nickname. So their father was Tommy Fingers Gallagher. Now, being from
Irish
New Jersey,
mob.
Well, being from New Jersey, that was my first thought. But no, apparently Tommy Fingers Gallagher used to milk cows by hand as a small child, hence his nickname, Tommy Fingers. But they said Tommy Fingers' favorite line was, "Don't lose your health looking for your wealth."
Words to live by.
Dar, dar, dar.
What was the pitcher? Mordecai, was it 2 fingers?
Three fingers brown.
Mordecai, 3 fingers brown. I mean,
Hall of Famer.
That's one of the best, yes.
I had a fraternity brother whose nickname was the Thumb. And if I showed you a picture of him, he looks like a thumb. His head looks like a thumb.
And so that's why he's named Thumb. We had a fraternity brother named Earth Dog. Mm-hmm. And then people would ask, what does that mean? I'm like, well, he looks like an earth dog. I said, what's an earth dog? I'm like, well, look at him. That's what an earth dog would look like. Had no explanation for it, but that made sense. We are opening the show as though there's not a lot of stuff going on, but there is a lot of stuff going on.
One more thing I've got to give a shout out. I have a friend from college whose nickname is Dome, or Domehead, because he had a propensity for thinking with the smaller head. And at one point, these girls asked how he got his nickname, and he's very bright, very quick thinker. He said, "Oh, I went to a concert at the Carrier Dome and I threw up, so they started calling me Domehead."
No. And he didn't have a curiously large forehead to make that an easy, like he could have, so he had to come up with something.
And came up with it. So
all right.
Anyway,
all right.
So what's on your mind, sports-wise?
So we're coming off a, I think, very exciting college football playoff championship game. Indiana winning their first ever national championship in football with a 27-21 win over the University of Miami. Miami, who eked out a spot into the college football playoffs, obviously proved their worth, gave Indiana a better game than, everybody else in the playoffs seemed to, and actually had a shot to win it without the, Carson Beck interception on the last, or basically to end the game. The Heisman Trophy winner, I think, validated his selection as the winner of that illustrious trophy. And it was fun to watch. We don't have the numbers yet. I want to say it seems like, in this big data era, we seem to get viewership numbers a little slower. But I suspect that they'll be quite significant and substantial, and we'll look forward to reporting that. But it's just so funny. It's like we just had this great game and the culmination, and now we have a deadline looming later this week on the CFP deciding whether or not it expands to 14 or 16 teams or more. It seems like the SEC and Greg Sankey, want to make that even bigger. So I guess they can get everybody in from the SEC. And the Big Ten, being the other player on this. So, that'll be an interesting thing to watch. We wake up to, read a FOS story on Duke suing their quarterback who basically had opted out after agreeing to stay. And that's a whole trend that I think we're going to see now in this era of transfer portal, NIL, et cetera, and the guarantees that these schools are making. Interesting. The thought is that he was all set to go. And with Carson Beck, I guess finally leaving after 15 to 17 years of playing college ball.
I think he wanted to make sure that his son was prepared to take the reins. I say this hyperbolically. Well, let me go back. And Miami played a good game. Miami are still the convicts. Carson Beck refusing to shake hands after the game. The one kid on Miami punching the Indiana player after the game. Just very unsportsmanlike conduct on the part of some Miami players. It's disappointing.
The only thing I'll say on that is I don't know what precipitated that. I'm not justifying what he did. I do know that, and that was Fletcher, the running back who had a great game. He did go out of his way to make sure that he spent some time with Mendoza after the game. But I'm not saying at all that anything he did was right, was justified in any way. But I would like to know what happened to lead up to that. That's all. That's all I'm saying. I'm not to justify anything that he did.
True.
It was ridiculous.
True. But let's go back to this kid, Darian Mensah. I think that's how you say his last name, from Duke.
Yep.
I say this hyperbolically, but this is a sign of the apocalypse.
Oh, man.
In college football. No, it is. It's a very bad development. First of all, how can this kid come back to Duke, right, with that sort of animosity between the two parties? But, Carson Beck played 6 years, went to different schools. This kid, he signs an NIL deal, Mensah, and then he wants to leave the school after he just signed this contract. They've got to put a stop to this nonsense in the transfer portal. Yeah. I think, if you go back to, I remember what Rick Jones said when we had him on the show. You get two transfers. You get one as an undergraduate, and then if you have eligibility as a graduate student, you get a second one. Period. Done. End of story.
Well, it is interesting because at least what I've heard, and I didn't see this as part of the story that really came out today, is that the school that he's suspected of wanting to go to with a big guarantee is Miami. This is just adding more and more on to this idea that for people like you and me that feel that players should have had the right to be compensated and they're now being compensated, that this is just throwing everything so ridiculous that the ability to appreciate the difference of college football versus pro is just by the day slipping away. So it's not just because it's about money. We know there's big money in college athletics. But all of this stuff and the suits and the agents and it really is getting ridiculous. Now, we haven't even talked about the fact that this story is coming out of Duke football. Like a Duke football quarterback is that in demand. They were the ACC champions with 9 wins, 5 losses.
Right.
And it's not like they're in obviously, their basketball program is historically great. Their football program is not. They happened to be able to beat Virginia in the conference championship, which opened up the window for Miami to even get in. So that part was good, I guess.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
and
listen,
the guy is good. He is a good quarterback. In the Wake Forest game, which is the one Duke game I watched this year, he's quite good.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Duke has had some decent quarterbacks. You know, Riley Leonard went from Duke to Notre Dame.
Daniel Jones.
Yeah. So, yeah, Daniel Jones.
Well,
Dave Brown. Westfield's own Dave Brown.
The other big college story is in basketball side. One of your predictions this year that we're going to see another big scandal, and it's going to be in the prediction market side. But what we saw last week was an indictment of the classic old school point shaving scandal in basketball.
It's almost quaint.
It's almost quaint, other than the fact that they're betting overs and unders on halves. To the point we're constantly making, the more stuff that can be bet on, the easier this stuff is going to be manipulated. One of the schools that was caught up in this was DePaul, and the place I used to work, and that kind of hit home in a way. But I had a friend, who's actually the friend that hooked us up with Josh Altman. He was doing PR for Prime Video, Race Alone, and he sends me the video of the St. John's game where the guys were trying to keep the spread at a certain point, and they were bricking free throws. Oh man!
I went to the St. John's game last night. I don't know if that was intentional, quite honestly. The way they're not that good.
Well, yeah, but this goes back to the 2023-24 season and 2024-25 season. So it's not anything that was happening this year, but 17 Division I teams, according to the indictment, fixed and attempted to fix over 29 games. A number of players are involved. 26 people were indicted, former and current college basketball players, and involved, like I said, in a number of schools, with DePaul being one of the most prominent because they play in the Big East. So, and the amounts were staggering. That's what's unbelievable. $458,000 for North Carolina A&T to lose against Towson. 424 on Kent State to cover a first half spread versus Buffalo. Schools like that, with that, someone finding those avenues, thinking, I guess, that these aren't things that will be able to get picked up. So yeah, you use an interesting word. It's kind of quaint by today's betting standards, but it adds those, spread bets on halves that just, I think, make it. It's scary what could be coming down. And I have to tell you, I see a drop in the NFL now, or college, and I start wondering.
Yeah.
People keep betting, so I guess they have that thing going. But it's hard for someone that's looking at these stories, and we all what do we want? We want to watch games as fans that don't bet, that are played out legitimately.
When I was in college, I had a guy who lived on my hall named Derek Harmon. He went on to play for a couple of years, and he Scott Malaga, our friend, broke many of his rushing records. But Derek went on and played a couple of years for the San Francisco 49ers, won a Super Bowl. Anyway, his brother Ronnie Harmon was a much more accomplished player, played for the Chargers and the Bills for many years after a stellar career at Iowa. But I remember that Ronnie was investigated because I think he fumbled 2 or 3 times in the Rose Bowl his senior year. But to your point, now it's almost like everything is got to be under question.
So. And the money for a college kid that, and these weren't big NIL kids, right? I mean, it was a little earlier before some of that stuff started exploding anyway.
Yeah.
So they're getting, I think, between $10,000 and $30,000 on some of these, the execution of some of these things, or that's what's reported. Yeah, it's sad. It's disappointing. But I do think, I can't give you this one yet because I don't know where the bets were being made through.
Nor do I want to take it. Nor do I want to take it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're confident that there will be something bigger and better. I believe.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah.
I don't want it to happen, but I think it is bound to happen.
But the college football championship was great. So let's end the college section of this.
Oh, I had
on a
something
positive
else.
note.
No, let's go back. Let's not. Because the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, is now looking into college agents, which I guess is a positive story. Because they are, unlike professional agents who are registered and sort of overseen by the Players Association, that is not the case in college. So the FTC chose a number of schools at random and went to them and said, are you having any issues? Are your agents complying with rules and regulations, so on and so forth? So I actually think that's a good sign in collegiate sports. But to end on a really positive note, I would not say that game was one for the ages, the Miami-Indiana game, but I would say that run by Mendoza at the end of the game was a play for the ages. This kid took one in the chops early in the game. His mouth was bleeding.
Yep. Should have been a penalty.
Should have been a penalty, wasn't a penalty, and like it happened earlier in the year against Ohio State, where he got knocked out of the game for a play or two, it just seemed to energize him, and he looks like an aw shucks golly gee type kid. I don't think I don't think he's shaved yet. He looks so young, but he is a tough competitor.
Yeah, he is. Interestingly, his brother, who is on the Indiana team as well, announced for going into the portal because he wasn't going to be the starting quarterback. They've already brought somebody else in from the portal I think, to be the next, the heir apparent.
Yeah, I forget where the kid's going, where the younger Mendoza brother's going, but he looks just like him.
He's probably going to go to the Raiders, right? And he'll probably be able to, be under the tutelage of Tom Brady. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he does in his first year. Will he have a first year like Drake May and then come back and be really good? I think he certainly has the arm and the vision, it looks like, and the toughness to play in the NFL. He'll get hit. He'll get hit a lot harder, and they'll be on him a lot faster.
Yeah, and 𝗵𝗵𝗽𝗖𝗂 said, he's not used to, taking snap under center. He's going to have to learn that. Far be it from me to prognosticate how good a player a quarterback is going to be. But, you look at C.J. Stroud, had a great rookie year and has sort of regressed over the last couple of years.
I'll say.
But he's going to be on his, fourth offensive coordinator in 4 years. So there's something to be said for that as well. Yeah. Anyway.
We have an awesome guest that Tim and I are both very excited about coming up. Do we want to? There are two CBAs that are up. Obviously, the WNBA one is happening fast and furiously, and we'll see whether or not there are any games lost. But the MLB CBA will be one that is going to be watched very closely this year. And I'll raise my hand as a Cubs fan. Was not happy to see that Kyle Tucker chose to take a massive offer to go to the Dodgers, to be on a team where he won't be the biggest name on the team. And it definitely is going to impact the way or the strategy that MLB and the other owners have to tackle this CBA negotiation. Clearly, the Dodgers, it just doesn't matter. They will sign who they want to sign, and they're able to make money because their RSN is profitable. They have sponsorship coming in from other places. Their popularity in Japan because of Ohtani is massive. And they have the money. I mean, they have big money. So they aren't in any hurry to stop spending to build a team that will be the absolute prohibitive favorite going into the season to win a third straight World Series.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Yankees of the 70s and early 80s, where George Steinbrenner just spent money without any regard for profitability or financial or fiscal responsibility. I was having this conversation with a couple of friends of mine the other day, including Dome, who is a huge baseball fan, huge Red Sox fan. But anyway, there's two schools of thought here. The one school of thought is that there's going to be a salary cap, but there will be some sort of grandfathering that will protect the Dodgers from all of this. Because Kyle Tucker, 6-year or 4-year, $240 million contract, which is crazy if you think about that. $60 million a year for this kid. The other school of thought is, and there hasn't been a lot of free agent activity this off season. So the other school of thought is these guys are holding their powder dry and they're going to work very hard to get a salary cap. One of the predictions I had was that there will be a work stoppage in baseball. This signing of Kyle Tucker does not make that any less likely.
Yeah, I think the signing at that number, my view is it makes a salary cap more necessary, a hard cap at the top. But it also makes it tougher because if I'm now the mid-ranked player that has a future of going there, why all of a sudden am I going to get penalized? So the Dodgers can get protected, but then what about other people going other places? Your comparison to the Yankees is an interesting one. I would say that Mark Walters and the Dodgers and, Guggenheim that owns the Dodgers has been a little smarter fiscally than others because they have a stadium that's printing money. They were the first team to go over 4 million, I think. That sponsorship situation I mentioned, that RSN situation, which is unique by today's standards in Major League Baseball, they seem to have a lot more going for them. Now, are they? I haven't looked at the book, so I don't know, but they certainly aren't in any rush to be screaming that they need more fiscal responsibility because they're getting killed. So I think it is interesting. I mentioned WNBA CBA and just wanted to kind of follow up why I thought that was interesting and I haven't seen the most recent numbers, but the first week of Unrivaled this year, after this really surprisingly with great PR and fanfare numbers last year, they did really well, are not going well. Their numbers have shrunk quite a bit in terms of viewership. So they got Paige Beckers playing, but there are a lot of people not playing this year. Of course, Caitlin Clark didn't go there. Angel Reese isn't playing this year. 𝗵𝗽𝗴 𝗖𝘂𝗹𝘁𝘂𝗿𝘲, who is one of the owners and founders of Unrivaled, is not playing due to injury. But they were like the first opening weekend, way down. So I bring it up because one of the thoughts is that the WNBA had to somewhat worry about what that could mean. Does this then put them back in better shape against the players, while the players would have loved to see how popular we are on the wherever we play?
Yeah, I don't think it helps the players' leverage at all. I mean, it's a very small sample size, but I don't think you can be surprised that the numbers are down because the novelty has worn off.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm the players, I'm a little bit concerned. Well, okay, we don't have that leverage anymore. Not saying that they won't get what they want out of the deal ultimately, but I don't think it helps the players' negotiating position.
Yeah, I've never really thought that Unrivaled was an exact competitor. They play at different times. It's a different style of ball. I think there's room for this 3-on-3 series. It would be interesting to see the WNBA take a role with Unrivaled, similar to say how the tour is involved with TGL. But we'll see how it plays out. I mean, 𝗵𝗽𝗴 𝗖𝘂𝗹𝘁𝘂𝗋 will be a potential big broker in that because of her dual role on the Players Association board, like an officer on the union side, as well as a founder of Unrivaled.
Yeah. I think we had talked about this at some point, that it would have been fairly easy for Unrivaled to pivot, expand into a 5v5 format. But again, that easy as in you're not changing the venues, you're not changing the fundamental aspect of the league and so forth. But again, now if you're an investor, you're thinking, well, do I want to sink money into something that's not necessarily going to grow?
Yeah.
If I'm the WNBA and I get this deal done with the players, I go and I do a partnership with 𝗵𝗽𝗴 𝗖𝘂𝗹𝘁𝑂𝗋 and Breanna Stewart and the other investors and owners of Unrivaled, and turn it into a situation where you can start to say, okay, well, listen, you may not get to the point that you want to be in terms of salary from the WNBA, but there are going to be more opportunities here in the off season to play in this Unrivaled, and we will give you promotional support, and we will share in the risks and the rewards of this thing. That's a potential route I could see being pursued once the WNBA players' collective bargaining agreement is completed and done. Notice how I didn't say prediction.
You save those for prediction day. This isn't prediction day. This isn't formal, official prediction day. Anything else you want to take on before we take a break for a guest?
No. But when is Rex Manning Day? Do you know? Do you get that obscure '90s film reference?
No. Will I know? Okay. Will I know it when you tell me? Like, will I go? Oh,
probably not.
Okay.
That's not a reflection on you. It's a reflection on my poor taste in movies. Empire Records, starring a very young Liv Tyler, Renee Zellweger, Rory Cochrane, who was great in the movie, Anthony LaPaglia, Debbie Mazar.
You are seriously like an IMDb, whiz. I thought I knew movies and I know some references on that stuff, but you go so far down the cast list every time you reference a movie. What's the movie called?
It's called Empire Records. It's about an independent record store in Delaware, I believe, and it's one day in the life of this record store, and it happens to be Rex Manning Day. Oh, and Rex Manning Day is actually April 8th. Interesting. I did not know that, so we're going to have to...
we're going to honor that on our April shows.
Yeah.
All right. This is winding weird spots.
Yeah, this is as good a time as any to take a break.
Be right
All
back.
right. We'll be back.
It's time for our guest.
So I honestly feel we have the perfect first guest for season 5. There are people in this business that we look up to. There are people in this business that we consider good friends. There are people that we have respectfully competed against. There are people that leave a legacy that lasts, but there is a very small number of people that fit every one of those descriptions, and even fewer that fit them all while remaining humble and kind to everyone. Mike Reisman is such a person, founding principal of Velocity, Team Epic, and MKTG. Mike is a sports marketing leader that so many of us have felt fortunate to know during our careers, along with Dave Grant, Alex Neroth, and Bob Wilhelmy. Mike led shops that built long-term client relationships that were the envy of the sports marketing agency business, truly the envy. I know I was always envious of that, while developing some amazing talent along the way. Now, I'm going to stop there before it just sounds like I'm completely blowing smoke up his ass and say, Mike, welcome to Wait, What?
Well, thank you. I'm very flattered by that. It's really great to see you guys. And if this is going to have to be a mutual admiration society for just a moment, what you guys do on What? Wait? Or is it Wait, What? I always forget. It's been amazing. 5 seasons in, I think. And it's smart and it's pithy and it's funny and it's, you guys have so much knowledge stored and it's I think it's a great service to the industry. And to your listeners. And I, too, have enjoyed working with you guys and competing. And, of course, Tim was a client for quite a long time during the AT&T days. I have to say, I've heard that sometimes when somebody says, great question, Pero gets the credit more often than not. But I can tell you from having worked for Tim as my client, he asks lots of tough questions, which I hope are not equalized today. I hope they're easy questions. But I do have to say one thing, if I may.
Yeah.
First, I'm sorry about the Bears, Dave. That was a very, very emotional roller coaster the last 2 minutes for you, I'm sure, on Sunday. And Tim, I just want to say your Cornell ice hockey team's looking pretty good, ranked 12th in the nation. 5th in the ECAC, but just a couple points behind that coveted playoff bye in the first round, as opposed to my alma mater, who's buried in last place. The Skating Saints have 1 win, and they're 2-21 overall. And between my Jets and my Skating Saints, I did some massive research and found this winter my teams are combined 5 wins, 35 losses, and 2 ties. It's been a rough winter.
Well, if this isn't proof of how well Mike probably prepared for any client meeting coming up. I mean, the fact that he comes on, I mean, it took him 2 tries to get wait what right, but we're going to give him a pass on that.
I got the website wrong a couple of weeks ago, Mike. So don't feel bad about that.
It's not like we remember anything either. But the fact that he came prepped with that, I mean, it's part of what makes Reisman a legend.
Listen,
no
I don't care what St. Lawrence's record is. When you make a trip to the North Country, it's always a tough time when you're playing against Clarkson and St. Lawrence. So, but thank you for the kind words, Mike. Really appreciate it.
Sure thing.
All right.
You guys want to just keep going and talking about Northeastern, collegiate ice hockey for a while?
No,
I know you can do it.
Yeah, we could, but let's go, because we got some great questions and we want to take advantage of Mike being here.
We're at the very beginning of the year 2026, as I mentioned, our first guest for this 5th season. I'm going to make it as broad as possible. What are you looking, as you look at the horizon of 2026, what do you think the big stories are going to be? What are the things that have you pretty interested as you look at the sports business in the coming year?
Well, I've listened to your predictions that you did at the end of the year, and I think some of them are pretty interesting. And I've read a few in publications and so forth. The one that hasn't gotten as much attention as others, I'm a bit of a political junkie. I was a government major back at St. Lawrence. Notice I've plugged my alma mater twice now already. And so I'm really interested in, the like political crossover that's happening on so many fronts. And whether you love them or hate them, and I'm not here to make a political judgment, President Trump has made an environment where politics and sports are crossing over in many areas. So, I'm interested. Will the Commanders name their stadium after President Trump? Is that going to happen? And how will brands react to that? Will that impact selling sponsorships to the new stadium? I don't know. Will there be protests at the World Cup? Will it be disruptive? Will there be ICE agents, rounding up illegals or legals or whatever they're doing? And will there be travel disruptions? I know, Tim, you mentioned this on a previous episode, but, what's going to happen to fans? What's going to happen to referees? What's going to happen to teams? What's going to happen to broadcasters? I mean, there's such an influx of international people coming from around the world into the country. There's bound to be some kind of impact that's going to cause a commotion. On a little bit of a lighter note, I'm going to be very interested to see the viewership for the UFC match at the White House. I think that's great for Dana White and the UFC. What a great spot to do it. I think it's kind of weird, though, that it's being tied into America's 250th celebration. I'm not quite sure what, a sport that features such violence has to do with celebrating the 250th, which is supposed to bring us all together. But I know it's good for Dana White, and I know that's important to President Trump. So that'll be interesting. Again, in this political crossover, what's going to be the reception of American athletes in Cortina? Once upon a time, American athletes would be very welcomed on European soil. But given how the administration has talked about NATO and our European allies, I wonder if that's going to impact how American athletes are received. And will that impact them? And what will their reaction be? And then one I'm really fascinated by, well, not necessarily 2026, it's right on the horizon, is what is going to be the relationship between President Trump and Gavin Newsom as LA 2028 come, because that relationship should be symbiotic. But how in the world are those two going to get along to make for the best games, as Juan Samaranch always used to say, the best games ever after every Olympics? How in the world are those two going to come together? Are they going to come together? So I'm keeping an eye on that. I know you guys were just talking about it. Again, politics, the conventional wisdom was that President Trump was going to be able to broker a deal between LIV and the PGA Tour. And Rory and Tiger, and I think Commissioner Monahan were all part of visiting with Trump right after he went into the office. it's not looking, at least most people are saying now, that the two tours are to come together. Doesn't seem like the PGA Tour needs that as much. So, and speaking of the tour, I'm really interested to see how Brian Rolapp and the tour handle this consolidated schedule. As you guys might know, I've spent a lot of my career working in the golf space, and there's 42 tournaments in, 35, 40 cities that really depend on the tour for the economic impact, for charitable contributions, and to bring a big event into their markets. And there's going to be half of those tournaments that are cut out. How is that going to be handled? And if they think they can create a secondary tour with some of the tournaments that are cut out, are they really going to be able to get sponsors? And are they really going to be able to finance them in a way that's going to make them solvable? So that's a really interesting story to watch. And while I know Rolapp really puts a lot of value on scarcity and wants to oblige the players on their travel conditions, I think that's a huge challenge for him to make that work. And then the last one, not the last one, actually I have a bunch more, but I do want to talk about Major League Baseball because like you guys, I'm a huge fan of baseball. As a consumer, I love baseball. I know it lines up with the Jets. I love the Mets. I know I love the Jets and Mets, which is very difficult. But I just don't see how they're going to not miss games in 2027. And I think that's a tragedy. Yeah. Things are going so well. We had this majestic 2025 World Series. ESPN, MLB, despite ESPN withdrawing, developed a pretty good media deal. I'm excited to see Major League Baseball back in NBC. I think we're all old enough to remember the 𝘭𝘠𝘬𝘺𝘂𝗹𝘁 days. It'll be great to see MLB back on NBC. The World Baseball Classic, which is an awesome event, sometimes underrated, but a great event for baseball and stokes the popularity. But they have to figure this out, and it's not that hard, I don't think. Let's have a salary floor, put more revenue sharing that comes out of, the luxury tax that the big spenders make. And for God's sakes, make sure deferred payments count against the average annual, salary equation. And anyway, those are just some of the things.
I'm voting for Heisman as mediator, moderator right now, Tim.
I mean, these things, this could be figured out. And I worry a little bit that we don't necessarily have the leaders to do it. I think Tony Clark and Rob Manfred are probably good at a lot of things. I'm not sure they're the best people to lead labor negotiations. I don't know. I just worry about it. I don't know if that's true or not, but if those two can't get together and lead their negotiating teams to find a solution, they are going to have to be leaders in making this happen. So I have some concern about that. By the way, another fascinating story, if I may, and you can cut me off if you want on this question, but I thought about a few things. One is, I think what's happening with flag football is amazing. Like what the NFL has put into it. It's not an accident. They're concerned about, injuries, head injuries and damage done. And it gives an outlet to so many other people, so many other boys who want to avoid contact. And of course, it brings so many women into the game in a way that, is happening that only the NFL can do. And of course, the continued growth of women's sports. I heard Sarah Cummins the other day. One of the great things about the boom of women's sports is bringing so many smart and energetic and passionate female executives into leadership that bring a new way to look at sports and a new way to engage the consumer that I think is really helping the women's sports boom. And the last one on my list, if I may, and Dave, you and I were texting about this yesterday, is I'm always interested to see what Red Bull does. To me, they are...
Let's save that one. We have a question coming up that I think might be an interesting thing for you to talk about that on. So if that's okay with you. I'm not surprised that you obviously have thought through, here are the things that are happening in the world. So we appreciate all of that you just shared.
Just a point of clarification. Rob Manfred was an industrial and labor relations major at Cornell University. So I always try to get that in when I can. But anyway, be that as it may, Mike, let's drill down a little bit and talk about the agency business. You obviously, your career in that, but with consolidation, with private equity making investments, with AI, all of these things being part of the mix now, what shifts do you see in the future for the sports marketing agency model?
Well, it's been a increasing magnet for private equity, as we all know. Most recently, Goldman Sachs investing $1 billion in Excel, which is really a great agency that's grown significantly. We know 𝘭𝘵 has the investment, not only from their original investor, but a couple of others have come in, and CAA and 𝘮𝘩𝘦 and so forth. I have to say the $1 billion investments are a bit over my pay grade in terms of totally how to assess it. But obviously it gives the companies capital for, more investment, more acquisitions, more diversification. And I think it's, really critical. What's it do to the model? I can speak to it from, my piece of the world, or the piece of the world I was most involved with, which is the consulting segment, working with brands primarily and properties to help them make the most of their investments and to, help them engage with the consumers the best. And I think the additional capital that they have, if it's used wisely, is really critical, to increase the technology capabilities for those agencies serving brands and properties. The agencies are really needing to be competing, are needing to invest in technology stacks that allow them to personalize experiences. And those personalized experiences are critical to success. It's what consumers really expect these days. The first-person data that technology allows is really important to getting the best consumer insight, which leads to the best sponsorship campaigns. And they need the data to, really have the best analytics for analyzing the ROI and the impact. More than ever, the FOs are asking for the impact of what sponsorship investments cost. And for years and years and years, we were all in the wilderness in measuring sponsorships. And we tried, and we all, I think, had some really interesting ways to do it. But it has become more sophisticated, and this technology investments will help to do that. And then, there's, when you really get into how it helps to develop campaigns and promotional programs, it's about hyper-targeting. It's real-time insights into behavior and sentiment that makes programs truly personalized. It's about predictive analytics. It's about immersive experiences. And I think the best agencies will turn that consumer intention that they gain through this technology, will turn attention into earnings. And sans that investment, I think you're going to go out of business, or you're going to be on the fringes. So for me, to kind of answer the question in a synthesized way, the agency model is being made more sophisticated through these investments from PE and the technology that it creates. What worries me is that these investments put such an emphasis on profit. And when you think about the economic models, it puts an emphasis on profits perhaps more than top line revenue. And that can have a tendency to erode creativity. It erodes, that passion that an account person has to start a small account and make it large and make it something meaningful. And I've talked to some friends in the business who are leaving the agencies because of that pressure. And so, will there be a talent drain of the people traditionally that we've grown to admire at these agencies as the companies look for, tech talent and have a drive for profit? So, that's kind of how I look at it. It's probably mostly good and mostly, important.
Let me follow up with a question related to the agency business. What was the secret sauce for Velocity, and then later when you created Team Epic, and then eventually became MKTG? What was that secret sauce? And then the follow-up is, what do you feel the legacy of those agencies will be in the sports marketing world?
Thanks for asking that question. One of the things as we get older, we have time to reflect on, what we've done. And when you're in the middle of doing it, you don't really relish it or cherish it. But, mostly, like in many things, it's the secret sauce is about the people. And, I was so blessed and so fortunate to be surrounded by so many awesome people. And we were able to attract, a lot of really, really just terrific young people. And I think the secret sauce for us, we always have said we didn't really have a business strategy. We had a culture strategy. And when, we left Clarion, which was a very, very dysfunctional place, it's very, very politically charged, our culture strategy was basically to be everything Clarion wasn't. It was just a really difficult place to be. So we created this culture which was determined to be apolitical. And we would say that, if you were political, this wasn't the place for you. And there's some agencies, not that it's right or wrong, where politics do play a part, but not at our agency. It just was not. It was something that we weren't going to tolerate. It's been interesting to watch some of the coaches this couple of weeks that have been fired. Guys like Tomlin and Harbaugh, Sean McDermott, of course, Andy Reid is still in there. I think every one of them talked about establishing a culture. And if you look at organizations, and I know recently you had Ted Dalton from the Celtics and Dave Alpern from Joe Gibbs Racing, from the top down, those companies have established a culture. But then it's bottom up. It's people who, you can't force a culture. It's people who embrace the culture. And we did build a bottom up culture. We hired people in internships with every intern we hired in our training program, we hired with an eye of bringing them on full time. And they absorbed our culture and lived our culture and appreciated our culture from the first time they walked into our buildings. And when you talk about the legacy, what I think I'm most proud of, yes, the client work, yes, the awards and, a lot of those things. What I'm most proud of is when I see so many of the young people that we hired that are populating important positions in the world of sports and entertainment marketing. It means that we really contributed to young people. We really contributed to their lives. We've helped them, in their careers and where they are today. And the amount of people I talk to who started with the agency and grew their careers through working with us at, Velocity and Team Epic, who just thank me for the opportunity, not just me, but Dave and Bob and Alex, thank us for, experiencing what they experienced and learning what they learned. To me, that's the legacy, as the people that carry those lessons into businesses elsewhere.
It's interesting, Mike, because Tim and I actually appeared on Carl Thomas's podcast just this week. We had recorded it last year, and I talked about Frankel in a very similar way, because Bud Frankel did what you guys did, and that was such a kind of a great lesson, that kind of bottom-up concept of where the power base of the organization is. But that comes from great leadership. And I think, to your point, that the answer you were giving before in talking about the challenges of PE or other type investment, that makes that continuation a bit tough.
It does. Of course, we were bought by Aegis, and then Dentsu bought Aegis, and there is a collision between
Yeah, we tried to buy you at SFX. I mean, when I was, you'll recall that discussion probably, but
well, there's a collision that comes when that happens, and we fight to keep our cultures. We fight to keep the things that made us, successful, and sometimes they're maintained and honored, and sometimes they aren't.
Somewhat along the same lines, but looking at sponsorship in general, we really wanted to get your take on what makes a great sponsorship, and importantly, has that changed or has that generally remained the same? We know that there are all kinds of opportunities and digital opportunities and different ways to market a sponsorship, but what to you makes a sponsorship great, and has it changed or stayed the same over time?
Yeah, well, that's I guess that's a question we should all be at. That's a great question. Is that your question or Tim's question?
It's my question.
Okay.
So we'll. He does write great questions. He hasn't written enough of them. This is the point on that.
Well, he dropped off, so you can take credit for that one. So that's perfect.
No, I would give him credit.
I know you would. I know you. Well, look, yes, there are changes, but I think there are about 4 truisms that remain, that are important to sponsorship. First of all, I believe that sports and entertainment continues to be the one marketing tactic where you can reach consumers in the zenith of their, emotional and passional behavior and appeal to them with a brand message. Nothing will ever replace that. Nothing else compares to marketers. Create that emotional experience, insert brand here. Okay, whether it's a live experience, whether it's signage, or whether it's AI generated, it doesn't matter. That remains true. Secondly, sponsorship continues to be tribal. Okay, sports and entertainment continues to be tribal, right? We root with our friends and our family and like-minded people, and we root for teams and athletes with like-minded people. We jump for joy. We cry. We hug strangers at stadiums. We do high fives with people we never in a million years would have done that with, at stadiums, at bars, at watch parties. And that tribal nature that we have, I just, not to keep going back to my fandom, but Jets Nation. I mean, we're a tribe, right? We commiserate, we empathize, and we surround ourselves, like I say, with like-minded people. So that never goes away. There's an old adage, nobody reads advertising. People read what interests them. Sometimes what interests them is an ad. People are drawn to what entertainments, and brands need to capture their attention with things that are entertaining, and consumers expect brands to be entertaining. This was true in the Mad Men era. This was true in the digital era. This is true in the so-called algorithmic era, and it's always going to be true. And I think the 4th truism is sometimes simple is better. And I'm always think of the brainstorm we had many years ago, I think it's 15, 18 years ago now, where we came up with the campaign for FedEx's new NFL sponsorship called the Air and Ground campaign. We had a young guy who now is in Consulting Excel named Joe Zajac, who after days of brainstorming came up with this idea of FedEx Air and Ground. It's the essence of the FedEx brand. And by the way, at that time, they really needed to elevate their ground transportation capabilities because they were getting their asses kicked by UPS. And it's the very essence of the NFL with the air game and the ground game. That campaign has endured and is still the basis of FedEx's NFL promotions, what it is 18 years later. And it was so simple, but it has so many creative spin-offs that simplicity, is still very much. So those are constants. There's nothing new here. But then, what's changed? And you guys know that personalization is taking center stage and AI is changing everything other than the truisms I mentioned. And AI is so important to how we're looking at sponsorship campaigns. It's changing sports marketing. It's changing fan engagement. AI enables real-time adaptive personalization at scales. AI allows us to, personalize content, timing, offers, interactions that are offered to individual fans. And it's in this context that we're tapping into fan behavior in new, different, and effective ways that drive purchase, that drive retention, that drives, really new, different, and very individual relationships that brands are having with consumers. And again, if you take that and tap it into those truisms, it becomes a very powerful marketing mechanism. So that's, I guess, what I see is changing.
But you started talking about Red Bull, and I did cut you off. I've always felt like Red Bull, from a branding standpoint, just nails it every time. But I wanted to get your perspective on why they're such a I have to watch this type of sponsor.
Well, their innovation, if there's an 11 on a scale of 1 to 10, they're an 11. And they have done such a good job of tying the very essence of the Red Bull brand, this, nascent energy drink that has energized an entire generation, and put it into bespoke sports that are about the adrenaline rush, right? I mean, hopefully the listeners have Googled, some of the crazy sports that Red Bull has created. One of my favorite ones was a few years ago, they did downhill speed skating, where they created downhill ramps in, for instance, down in Montreal. And it was like a curved snake ramp where these speed skaters were going, 100 miles an hour. The one that I just looked at the other day, and if you don't do anything else from this podcast, Google the Red Bull, I think it's the Red Bull Rampage. This is completely nuts. They go on to out to Mount Zion in Utah, and they create on these cliffs these downhill cycling off these massive jumps. And if you are part of the Red Bull generation, you are watching this and you are enjoying this, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it so fits the brand, and it's so perfect for the brand.
I've always also loved that, and you can get great borrowed equity from another property, and you've obviously done a lot of those type of sponsorships, properties that fit the brand. But their ability to so consistently create and own, so it just right out of the box this is Red Bull, is incredible. We were going to talk a little about World Cup and Olympics, but I think we covered a little of that in the upfront. I want to give you an opportunity, Mike, to talk about anything that you have going on or have been working on. We know that you've had some big involvement with Sailforth 250, and I wanted you to talk about all of those projects, and also, if you're inclined to, anything that you're doing on behalf of your late wife, Liz. And I know you've committed a lot of time and energy and commitment to some of her memories, especially within music education. So floor is yours to chat about things you're working on and are passionate about right now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Dave. And I guess I'll choose to speak about Liz. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. So for those who don't know, my wife passed in now 2019. And amongst other things, she was a sports marketing writer. In fact, when on our first date, I'm thinking, well, maybe I can get her to write about our sports marketing agency. And if it turned into romance, great. She was the sports marketing television writer at that time for the National Sports Daily, if you remember that great publication. And the next day, the National went out of business. So I was stuck with a out-of-work sports marketing journalist. And later, she wrote a lot of sports business for Smart Money and for Forbes and launched Golf Digest Woman. But her real passion was music education. She grew up as a musician and played in a bunch of symphony orchestras, in the junior symphony orchestras in the Bay Area, and had a real passion for music education. So when she retired from journalism, we bought a music store here in Connecticut that was dedicated to educating students. So lessons, instrument rentals, instrument repairs, and so forth. And her passion for music education grew. She became on the board of some of the big trade organizations like the National Association for Music Merchants. So when she became ill, we had an opportunity to talk about things that would be meaningful to her. So I've spent the last 7 years, I always say, checking off the box of my posthumous honeydew list. And part of that was creating a couple charitable, one's a foundation with the National Association of Music Merchants Foundation, with the Liz Reisman Fund for School Music Education, has developed programs for a lot of underserved communities, including one here in New Haven, Connecticut. And then we've created a scholarship fund at the Cazadero Summer Music Camp out in the Bay Area. And in the end, we've been able to raise a lot of money for scholarships for kids to go to this camp. And I think she'd believe that we're checking that box, and I hope to continue checking the box on what would make her happy.
You know, there are a lot of things to admire about you, Mike, and that's one that I don't think you're just checking a box, but you've definitely checked it.
Yeah, probably true.
You're doing what was in your heart, and I think what was, and it's just quite admirable. So congratulations on that, and building that legacy for Liz.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, we are going to go to the closing questions. Believe it or not. You started strong. You've remained strong. We're going to let you finish strong here. So we ask these 2 questions of every guest that we have on. And the first one is,
where'd your career get started? Where'd you start it?
I always wanted to be in sports marketing. When I got out of college, believe it or not, there were only 2 graduate programs in the sports marketing business. One was at Ohio University, and I think the other was University of Massachusetts. When I was in college, I knew I wanted to be in sports marketing. You know, my dad always said, do something you're passionate about. And so I knew I wanted to be in it. And my mom would send me clippings back in that day and age of this little company called IMG and this guy called Mark McCormick and the things they were doing to stir up my interest, right? And I took an interest. So I was very lucky. My sister had a high school friend who played soccer here in Westport at Staples High School and had a job running revenue, the chief revenue officer for the New York Cosmos. And I got an internship there my sophomore year in college to sell ads in Kick magazine, which was the magazine distributed at all the stadiums. And he said, go sell advertising. I said, I don't know anything about advertising. I certainly don't know what a CPM is, and they didn't tell me anything about it. So I would go in, for instance, I remember I went to Japan Airlines and say, if you buy the ad and one person buys a round trip from New York to Tokyo and back, that will pay for the ad. And they threw me out of the office. So I sold one ad.
That's good. Try.
I sold one ad to a restaurant in Midtown called the Brazilian Pavilion. And I told the guy, if you buy an ad, we can get Pele to show up at your restaurant and have a meal and take pictures. So I go back to the office and I tell Mark Brickley, the late Mark Brickley, who was my sister's friend. He worked for a guy named Tom Werblin, who was Sonny Werblin's friend, if you remember that name. And I told him what I did. And he looked at me and he said, are you freaking crazy? Pele's not showing up at that restaurant. So I had to go back and tell the guy that he wouldn't do it. So
you were one of those type of sales guys. I never would have guessed.
So they had given me a $1,500 draw, which they never recouped. But then a few years later, my mom knew a guy named Chip Campbell who had been at the LPGA and worked at the PGA Tour. And he knew about a job opening at the LPGA. And they had an opening. And I got my first job working for the LPGA, working in PR, traveling around the world with 150 women golfers and a core of young people, and it was an absolute blast.
All right. We're going to move on to the next question, and we know you've mentored so many people in this business, but if you had to right now offer one piece of advice to someone looking to break into the business, what would it be?
Well, I think it's initiative and differentiation. Look, I at the risk of taking too much time, and I'm sorry, Dave, you guys absolutely, I think, should develop a whole package of all of your guests that have come together and publish them, sell them to Teamwork and Buffy, or find a way, because there's been so much great advice given, and put them all together into a package. Do something with it, because you've gotten so much wisdom, and certainly the wisdom that you have to show initiative. Go out there, volunteer, get involved with local running events, golf events, tennis events. Do something that do many things that show the person that you're interviewing with that you've taken the initiative, that you want this more than you want anything else. Okay, that's really important. But I think what's even more important is differentiate yourself. It starts with being responsive. I can't tell you the amount of people that I talk to on a networking basis that don't even have the common courtesy of sending a thank you note. Okay, so it starts with just having common sense courtesy, say thank you, be appreciative. But after that, if you have the chance to network with somebody, by all means, stay in touch with them. Find a way to differentiate. There are millions of people like you looking for a job. So what are you going to do to stay front of mind? And I always advise young people, find ways to have contextual relevance. When you've networked with somebody, write down some things that you think were interesting to the person that you've talked to, and send follow-up articles, follow-up thoughts, follow-up ideas. If you get another internship, if you get your first job, send them a note, tell them what you're up to. Send them a Happy New Year's note, tell them a Happy Holidays note, but stay top of mind. Follow up, follow up, follow up, because guess what? They're probably going to forget you from that one time you've networked, okay? And I'll tell you, there's a young man who I introduced to CAA. He got a summer internship. There's never been a young man that has been more consistently following up with me and with his CAA contact than he has. And guess what? He graduates from Fordham in May, and CAA has hired him into a full-time position this summer. And if anybody wants to talk to me about, the best way to do that and the best way to stay top of mind, I'm happy to talk to him about it. But that would be my advice.
That's great, Mike. Thank you for that. We have gotten some amazing advice, but we always love the personal and the kind of the actual experience that someone gives, because there's always a slightly different take on it that becomes very unique. So we do appreciate it. And thank you for spending time on this. As Tim mentioned earlier, we were both very, very excited for this discussion, because you're someone that we've both known for a while and truly respected and admired. So thanks for spending some time with us.
Well, DP, it's so great to see you, and it was good to see Tim, and I thank you for having me on What Wait, or Wait What, or
That'll be a joke. We might have to do that. Another great guest discussion. This business, Tim, I feel is so much better that Mike Reisman was in it, is in it. Just a wonderful guy. I feel very fortunate that I've known him. So we are at that point of the show where we take a little bit of a peek ahead, offer any shout outs that we have, any corrections that we need to make. So I will go to you, Tim, and say, what do you have your eye on?
Well, first of all, I don't have to make any corrections, so we might want to mark this day down almost like Rex Manning Day. What am I looking forward to? Another round of great football playoffs in the NFL, the conference championship games this weekend. I'll be back for that. But the biggest event on the sporting calendar of 2026 will be this Saturday, January 24th, 7 p.m., Lina Rink, Ithaca, New York, on the campus of Cornell University, where the number 12 ranked Cornell Big Red take on their hated rivals, the Harvard Crimson. It's the only game that Carolyn absolutely will go to.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
So interesting story. When I was a freshman, there was only I think 2 Americans on the entire Cornell hockey team. One of them was my roommate, who was a walk-on.
Dome?
No, not Dome. Leo Landers. And the other one was a guy that Carolyn was dating at the time.
Dome. Wow. Oh gosh. Yeah, the Cornell sounds like it was a Peyton place. I think that, and especially with having someone that's, as much of a star in this business is seen as Mike Reisman on the show, I did want to give a shout out to another massive luminary that we lost recently in this business. And I did not know this gentleman, Frank Craighill, passed away. Frank, for those of you that don't know, was one of the original founders of ProServe, along with Donald Dell and Lee Fentress, Ray Benton. And he went on then to form Advantage International with Lee and Ray. And then, of course, Advantage International became Octagon. So there are a lot of kind of intertwined pieces here. But Frank was one of the legends, supposedly just one of the kindest, best mentors, would listener type of guy. So I wish I had met him and had a chance to actually work with him. But so many great things always said about him. Also, a story that I think we need to watch is yesterday. We're recording this on a Wednesday, and it'll be released on a Thursday. But yesterday, meaning Tuesday, LIV announced, and Phil Mickelson's team announced the signing of the reigning NCAA champion, Michael Losasso, to play on LIV, giving up his final season of eligibility at Ole Miss. He's pulling a Lane Kiffin here. And a shot at playing in the Masters. Now, I think what we're about to see, and this is an interesting salvo because they're playing it up really big because this is a top U.S. golfer moving over to LIV to sign for money. I don't know what the contract is. We haven't seen that. I've tried to find that, but it's a bit of a salvo following the Brooks Koepka announcement recently that we've talked about. And I'm curious as to, is this going to be the play, going after this young talent to try to bring them in with the promises of this big money so they don't have to earn their way in the tour's meritocracy?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I hate to sound like that old guy, right? This generation. But this generation of new golfers doesn't have the same sort of affinity for, connection to, desire to be part of the PGA Tour necessarily, if there are other options. They've grown up in a world with, different options for people to play in sports.
Yeah. But the point is they're going to have to respond in a way, at least, to think about what they're offering to these younger players. I would have thought that the Masters exemption and being able to play in that might have been a draw for someone. And golf is that way, as is in sports. All sports is. Do you want to be the best, or do you want to take advantage of the money that you have? And I'm not saying either one is wrong. I get it. But an interesting story to follow to see where they will end up going. Listen, what the tour may respond.
Yeah, if some of these kids sign with LIV and make more money guaranteed than they probably or potentially would make on the tour, especially in the early years, then that sets them up with a lot more flexibility as they move on in their career because they've got that financial security that they might not otherwise have had. If you're one of the lower ranked guys in the PGA Tour, you're barely breaking even after travel and paying your caddies and your agents and all that stuff. So if you're making this kind of money in LIV, regardless of what your long-term future with LIV is, you can have that flexibility, like I said, going forward. So
let's bring this show to a close. Once again, huge thanks to Mike Reisman for providing his valuable perspective on a whole range of subjects. Tim, thank you for another lively discussion. And, of course, mostly thank all of you for spending a little time with us each week. We don't want to sound needy, but remember to hit those follow or subscribe buttons on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc. You can also see more content and links at dpandmcgee.com. So with that, I'm DP, he's McGee. We'll talk soon.